Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are here in YouTube and you'd like to be part of the conversation, you have to click on the little link below and register for Office Hours. Then once you're in Office Hours during one of these events, you'll see a thanks, little butter there. Anyway, you will see another link to Mukana. Mukana is where we actually ask questions and discuss stuff. So that's where you want to go. If you think you can answer some of the questions, then what you want to do is join the panel. You need to get here early, be here by 6:40 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. If you aren't sure if you're ready to join the panel, you can get here as early as 6 and check what you're working on. So you can check your mic, check your cameras, etc. Between 6 and 6:40. During that time, we just kind of talk about things, whatever we feel like talking about. So that's kind of our warm up stage. Once we get to 7 o'clock, we're starting here. General questions for the first hour. Today we'll have general questions for both hours. So Monday is going to be open. This one anyway will be an open session. We do have a lot going on this week. So there's going to be a lot. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about environments. We talked a little bit about it last week, and I thought that it'd be good for us to just talk about generally like the environment and how it affects your audio. On Wednesday, we have special guests from AJA. We're going to talk about the color analyzer, and AJA will actually be joining us to talk about that. So we'll be talking a lot about scopes and all the things about those scopes. So it's going to be pretty exciting. We're going to talk about TikTok. I think a lot of people are still. It's been around for a while now, but people are still confused about what it does and what's useful and so on and so forth. So we're going to talk a little bit about TikTok on Thursday. HLS streaming on Friday. So a little introduction. This isn't going to be a deep dive. This is for if you don't know anything about HLS or how it works. We're going to talk about how that structures. That's building up towards some deeper dives into HLS as we go forward. Saturday, of course, is the big day now. We have education, of course, from 8 to 9. At 9 o'clock, Andy Carluccio, who's here with us here on the panel, is leading a 4-week course on how to use Zoom OSC. And obviously, I'm pretty excited about Zoom OSC. And I think that it's transformative of what we can do and how we can change the way events are done. And so I think it's really important for a lot of us to learn it. You'll see we have a lot of questions today about Zoom OSC, mostly inspired by our Saturday session. If you haven't seen the Saturday session, it's on YouTube. It was hectic. It was 2 hours. Andy was on the grill, for 2 hours. I imagine that Andy had to go take a nap after that. So not very long now. Yeah. So it was a lot of information coming fast. And so I think a lot of us were a little tired after that. It was just so much information. So really great example. You can still sign up and get a pro version of Zoom OSC, but you have to do it before the end of Tuesday. So we put out in the list that we sent out, you'll see that it's still available. So if you want to download it, Andy's got some videos. I think a lot of people were a little concerned about the first week that it was a little chaotic, that we were just talking about what was possible with Zoom OSC and kind of riffing. There are some videos now that you can watch that Andy's put together. So you'll see the links of those as well in the email that went out. So definitely this is an experiment, not only in, us learning Zoom OSC, but also in how we kind of administer education within the system as we move forward. And so Andy's been kind enough to join us and be a guinea pig in this process. So anyway, so we're really excited. We got a couple hundred people that have already started to move down that path. And so there's a really great community. In the pre and post shows, you'll see me adding a room that's just Zoom OSC. That's for all of you that are working on it, just a place that you know that you can go and discuss it pre and post this show. And of course, you can ask questions during the week or on Saturday is going to be the day that we're really dedicated to it. So anyway, just keep that in mind. And without further ado, let's jump into the questions. Go ahead, Bill.
Sure. The first one comes from Joshua Feingold in New York, who says, is there a way to program a Stream Deck button to bring up Zoom statistics?
I don't know if that's available in the API. I don't think that part of it is available, like being able to get to those preferences. I don't think those are exposed. So, yeah, go ahead, Andy.
Pardon me, you might consider something like AutoHotkey or Apple Scripts to try to get through the UI.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I ran into a different program problem that was one of those that didn't have access by either kind of shortcuts or API, and we found I have to look it up again, but it's a mouse positional type of thing that goes in the Stream Deck. You press the button, you train it where the position is. The mouse will go to that position and click. So you would actually have to go through and do multiple macros to get to that point probably, but it's definitely possible using that, as long as your Zoom is full screen or in the same place at every time.
Very good. Next question.
Andrew Flowerdew of Warwick says, has anyone seen the new version of Microsoft Stream implemented yet?
I haven't seen it implemented. I looked at it. It looks pretty. I mean, they put a lot of pieces together. I haven't seen anybody actually use all those pieces, but they seem to be slowly, putting together a relatively complete set of tools for publishing video and providing support. I see this more as a corporation infrastructure type of solution than really what what a lot of us do for an external. I think that this would be something if you're in Office 365 and your company's in 365 and you want to produce resources for your internal group. I think this might be perfect. I'm not sure if it's really publicly facing, but that's just the intention. The impression I got when I saw it. Any other comments about that? Hopefully we'll see someone actually use it. Next question. Go ahead, Sky. What were you going to say, Sky?
Oh, well, I'll find out what
You got to raise your hand faster, Sky.
well, I was hesitant because I'm actually working for that organization, and I'm not sure if I'll be able to say anything. So I put my hand up and then took it down. So we'll see what I know in about a week.
All right, thanks. Next question.
Guy Cochran from the panel here in Seattle has a simple little question that should be easy to answer. What is the future of cloud-based video switching?
Jeff, raise your hand. Jeff. Okay, there you go.
All right. So the future. I think the biggest thing in the future that I could see, and I have a very rose-tinted pair of glasses on, of course, is the scalability. That's the big part of it. Be able to grow it easier, faster. I've been working on a pretty big project, and that was the hard part, was getting it from a one type of production, taking that and then making a carbon copy of it to be able to do a second production, a third production, fourth production, fifth production, without just spending an enormous amount of time in engineering. And that engineering means me or my team that's doing the back end stuff. So I think more of what we're using is the Sienna processing engine as the hub of everything, and then that spilling out video, audio, going out to all those different other locations, but it's all coming through. Think of the processing engine as like the master router, which we of course use NDI router too. But in any truck or any MCR, you've got a router right in the middle of it, and that's kind of where I see the part that as more people are building broadcast workflows, it definitely makes a difference, is having that main middle structure to build upon to make it easier.
Go ahead, Bill.
I just wondered if somebody wants to describe what cloud-based video switching is for people who are not particularly technical who might be watching the show today.
So cloud-based video switching more or less is running virtual machines in the cloud, that those virtual machines are then doing software as a switcher, which there are about 6, 7, 8 that are true. I would say there's like 3 real switchers, 4 switchers, but then there's others that purport to be, that are just basically, they're switching video, but they're not video switchers. I guess that's. I don't know,
so are these modeled after like hardware things on Earth that you get a virtual version of a big switcher?
Yes. Yeah. The Viz Vector Plus, for instance, is a TriCaster 2. It is a TriCaster 2 Elite. For all intents and purposes, it just doesn't have physical inputs and outputs. Software, exactly the same. There's like very small limitations, or not limitations, but differences. But vMix was a software switcher to start with. So whether it's on premise or in the cloud, it doesn't really matter. OBS, same situation. The others that are like StreamYard, ShowFlow has one that's going to ShowFlow Studio, which is just doing RTMP. But StreamYard, for instance, and there's one other, Easy Live, I think is another one, easylive.io. I believe they have a kind of virtual. It's basically just taking video in, and you're just turning it from, I want this input to this input. It's not, quote, what I would consider a video switcher, because I come from a broadcast background. I want buttons to press that go from input to input really quick without having to worry about the format of how it's coming. And that's kind of my point, is it's getting to be that point again, or it already is. It just depends on the cost of your tool.
Go ahead, Chris.
I remember a couple of years ago when I first came across OBS, and I was like, wow, this is really amazing. And I saw that as sort of the third wave of video production. First wave being actual physical stuff you plug cables into. Second wave being putting some hardware into a computer. Think of like a video toaster or a TriCaster. And then when I saw software switchers, I was like, wow, this is like a whole new thing. Cloud-based is really kind of the fourth wave. Like now I don't even have to have the computer on site. It's just up there. And depending on what you can and cannot get into it determines what you can and cannot do. But it's to me, it's the future. Absolutely. I just don't understand it all. That's all. It doesn't mean it doesn't work.
Go, Stuart.
Jeff, are we probably better off calling it cloud-based routing rather than cloud-based switching? Because that's what we're doing. It's moving stuff from one location to the other, but it's more like a router in that we don't have...
No. A switcher to... Well, okay. Well, I guess it depends on how you're looking at it in some way, but a switcher is a router in a way, because you're cross points. You're going from 1 to 14 or whatever. So you're just connecting points. But a switcher... in my world, a switcher would be allowing you to add graphics, allow you to add video playback, allow you to create MEs, looks. A router is a point, 1 point, 2 points. That's it. It's just connecting those two sources. That's all. Where a switcher allows you to composite and build more.
So that's kind of switcher as a service up in the cloud.
Kind of. I mean, but you're installing a switcher is really still you're renting space like you would rent an office space from the cloud, and then putting your CPU space, your stuff into it.
Oh, putting your stuff, not just renting theirs.
Yeah, and I think, from my perspective, is that I think that probably everything I'm doing right now will be in the cloud in 4 or 5 years. I think 30% of it will be this year. I think that it'll be. I know that you're doing it that way, but I think that we do really. I mean, the problem is that again, some of the stuff that I'm doing right now, like most of my work right now, is all HDR and surround, and I don't know if you can barely do it in hardware right now, let alone putting that in the cloud. Now, I'm not saying that I can't. I'm just saying that as we innovate and figure those things out, I need to be able to see it. And there's so many intricacies of what's going on right now. And I've had a lot of trouble with complex routing, audio routing. The audio has been the hard part on my end. So as we solve those things, I think that those are there. I think that, I still think that some of the stuff that we're doing would be difficult to do in the cloud, as fast and change it as fast as I do it. And I have to leave it up. I have to leave a lot up for 2 months straight. And so the things I look at the cost.
Part is the cost. Right.
Yes.
When you weigh it side by side, it's terrible. Yeah.
So the thing is that I'm talking the events that I work on, there's 6 weeks to 8 weeks of it running straight. While it's not like a day of instance where it just turns on and it goes, or even a week. It's a month. It's 2 months of development and R&D and figuring stuff out. And I would pay for that hardware over and over and over. And it's a lot of processing. I'd pay for the hardware over and over and over again if I did it in the cloud. So that's why I still feel like some of the stuff I'm doing is in the cloud, but I definitely think that, again, I'm trying to figure it all out and start build instances in the cloud. I think that the 090, of course, is doing that. And then when I'm bidding on stuff, there's stuff that I'm bidding on stuff now that there's a box that just says, then I will call Jeff. Like this part I'll do on my own. This part I'll call Jeff. And eventually it'll be I'll work with Jeff, and then eventually we'll have I'll have capacity to do it. But I think that I do think that this is the future. I just don't think it's for me. It's not quite the future just yet. It's not the present. I go to Alex and then Roscoe.
So is video switching in the cloud? Is it currently routing and compositing? Is it usually one output or lots of different video outputs as well? Is it essentially doing lots of baking in at that moment, and also sending a few different bits of audios along so you can switch between audio tracks? Or is it really bundling stuff together and sending it all out as objects and stuff like that? Or is that further in the future?
No. we did an event from 1st of December where we were feeding 150 different Zoom meetings, and at a button press, any of those could have anything routed to them. So it was a whole lot of choices. Now that was routing, but in the actual switcher itself that we're running in the cloud, we could composite multiple things together. And yeah, there was tens of thousands of people watching.
I mean, that's
one of those meetings.
The real power of the cloud is scale. I'm gonna move on to the next question. We're gonna have another second hour, maybe as early as next week, where we bring Jeff in and we'll just make a whole hour of this because we could talk about it for a couple hours. All right, next question.
Orion Z. Slater in London asks Zoom OSC question: is there a minimum number required in the gallery to use galleryPosition commands? It keeps telling me it doesn't like it, but the message looks correct to me.
Andy.
So gallery position, we were actually just talking about this in Discord yesterday. So this is a request that we got from some video folks to index everything with 0. So when you're sending your galleryPosition command regarding the shape of the gallery view, and remember it's Mac exclusive, if you are providing it the number of rows and columns that you visually see and you start counting at 1, it's going to be out of bounds when you call the command. If you start counting at 0, thinking about the top left is the 0, 0 pixel, that's why we do it. Then you index over and then you can get the row and column and it'll be in range. And we tested that last night, and that was what some folks were having a problem. We'll clear up the documentation to make that more clear.
Next question.
Moving on to Dan Huber of Erie, Pennsylvania. Alex showed off a rack made for ATEM Minis. Is the purpose of the last ATEM just as a camera input for Zoom?
Yeah, so what he was talking about is I was showing this little thing that I printed over the weekend. So this will hold 4 little minis together. And the goal is we have a bunch of clients we're talking to that need to have more than a couple inputs. And if you start adding some of the features that we have, you need a couple of them. And so basically, and they're all HDMI inputs. So if you're talking about trying to teach, you have, computers and iPads and little cameras and so on and so forth, and they all are HDMI. What I find with my home system, I have the Constellation, and I'm converting everything to SDI. But that becomes a really heavy solution to mail out to people. And this might be a heavy solution, we'll see. So right now, as a thought experiment, I'm building basically a 4ME switcher with these little ATEM Minis that are there's 12 inputs that you can write over top of. The goal is that it may not, for some people, it may be just in a classroom or in a location. So that's why it's in hardware for this one specifically, is because the output of that top one could be a classroom, could be a conference room, could be or could be Zoom, or could be a live stream. So all those things are available to that output. And so anyway, so that's the reason that they're all stacked up, and I had to put them in a bundle so that I could connect them to each other. And as I get it further along, I'll show it to you guys. As far as it working, but it's a little thought experiment at the moment. I wouldn't say that it's a done thing. It's just that my current system is about $50,000 of hardware, and I'm trying to get it down to $5. So there's like a $5,000 thing that you can put into it. So the game is to play is like a $5,000 box that I can send out and then run it virtualize in the end, the ATEM Minis, you won't see them. They'll just be in a box, and you have a Stream Deck, and you can just cut to what you want to, or maybe not even a Stream Deck. I'm working on something else for that. So that you'd be able to just kind of have it all there, and then of course you can go out to whatever you want. So, and it's not very expensive, and you can use it. The idea is to make the interface really simple. Anyway, it's just something I'm playing with over the weekend. So anyway, that was my my weekend project, other than hanging out with all of you. Next question.
Guy Cochran of Seattle and the panel: how would you get 3 synced cameras on premises into the cloud to switch and add graphics?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Matrox right now, actually sitting by my desk. The Matrox Monarch Edge has 4 inputs. As you can see, I'm gonna make sure I get close. So 4 different inputs, and also has sync into it also, and you could do analog with a break-in cable. But the idea behind this encoder is it's 4 channels of SRT or RTMP if you had to, but SRT is its primary, and it will carry that up in a 444 color space. About a $10,000 box, and all 4 channels are 100% in sync whenever they arrive. The other is the Makita from High Vision, which is about 16,000, and that U.S. prices, of course, and that unit also does the same similar thing, and they are using SRT. Also, their difference is they will do H.264 and 265, which will save you in some bandwidth or give you a higher quality in the same bandwidth.
You go, Leland.
Or
yeah,
LiveView.
Jeff,
I forgot about LiveView. LiveView LU
Yeah.
800.
Mm-hmm.
I saw the logo. I'm just curious, is that the same Matrox company that was making video cards back in the early 90s?
Matrox? Yeah, they've been around forever. Yeah,
that's what I was curious. Okay.
They're still very strong, but they're OEM-ing cards. They're not really selling them. I remember Matrox, it was one of the first that we bought for editors.
Yeah.
Yeah, back in the day.
Okay, cool.
Next question.
TJ Asher from the panel in Minneapolis says, how do I set up multiple instances of Zoom OSC on a Mac?
Go ahead, Andy.
So there are a couple different ways that you can do this. The simple one is just to launch it repeatedly if you just need a couple of test cases. However, you can really scale this using scripts, using Bash. And I'm a little careful about distributing those scripts because of the implications that they have for security. But Benjamin actually made a great one yesterday that he was showing me that let him throw 45 instances of Zoom OSC with duplicated AV devices into a call instantly. And so they're around. If you ask for them, you shall receive.
Benjamin, just there's some point like he's going to go to college and that's great, but he could just immediately be, just the guy. He's a force of nature. Anyway, next question.
Next question comes to us from Alex 4D Goldner in the panel from London. I'd like to design branding and motion graphics for those using Zoom OSC. Which would be the best controllable playback system for me to take a look at so I can create OSC-modifiable graphics for others?
Go ahead, Andy.
So a note for the switcher on this section, can we stay in gallery view while I show this? So if I spin up the video feed that's currently listed with the dots, this is automatic titler that's running in the Isadora media server right now. So if somebody takes over speaking for me, and I've spent all of 45 seconds on this, so that's why the spacing is wrong. But it's
so
listening
so I'll start talking, and so then it just changes my name. It's cool.
You got it. Yep. So this is running in Isadora, and the way that it works, real quick, is if you can see that on the screen now, we can probably spotlight that now. Yeah, we're good. Okay. So this is the OSC multi-listener, and it is pulling in the active speaker command from Zoom OSC, and we give you the username as one of the 4 ways of identifying somebody from, we call it the user prefix. So right now it's pulling my name. It's going into a text draw actor and going out to a text layer. And then up here, I'm just Luma keying a graphic I downloaded from Google. And this is going out as alpha channel spout, and then that is going into NDI and vMix and doing some compositing.
So now if I start talking, will it change in real time? Will.
Yeah. So that was because I'm spotlit. So go ahead and speak, Alex.
Okay. So I'm going to start talking now, and we're going to see if it switches over. I'm not sure if we're spotlit or whether the speaker view. There we go. So you can see it change there. Yep. That's cool.
So there you go. Yep.
And by the way, as a reminder, pre and post shows will all have a Zoom OSC room, so that if you just want to hack through stuff together, sometimes Andy will be there. I'm not going to commit Andy to every one of those, but if you want a place to talk about it, we're going to kind of create one while we do this over this month. Next question.
Manolo Lozano didn't give a location. Is there a way to program the Stream Deck to show the time remaining for a video in the buttons with Qlab?
Anyone got a Qlab answer there? I am going to guess that it's almost absolutely that you can get a return of that. I don't know how to do it, but I'm almost certain that Qlab will have that information and be able to publish it. But I don't know for sure, and we don't have I think you've caught us without a Qlab expert today. So and a quick reminder that we are doing 2 hours of general questions. So we're right now. If you want to ask questions, it's a good time. Good time to ask questions. All right, next question.
Nick Prenger of Des Moines, Iowa. We just started using vMix in our office. What are some good tricks that you can use that most people don't? vMix tricks.
Go ahead, Stuart, and then Leland.
Start by getting used to the keyboard shortcuts and edit them and make them so that they suit you. Like I've got a keyboard set up for when I'm doing live streaming of the motorsport, where I'll call the camera that's looking at cars doing burnouts as camera 1. So I put that on the keypad on camera 1. Camera 2 is halfway down the track. Camera 3 is next to it pointing the other way. Camera 4 is looking at the scoreboards. And it just becomes habit to hit those cameras by the numbers on the keypad, exactly the same as what you would do if you had the Stream Deck sitting there and you program those buttons in on the Stream Deck. But yeah, learn to program your personal shortcuts that work for you.
Go ahead, Leland.
As far as the vMix interface goes, there's probably a few things that a lot of people don't know about. So I'll just flip over to it if you want to pin me real quick. Basically, the settings button, whoops, sorry about that. The settings button up in the upper right corner is where you're going to find the extra features that you may not see under here under options. So make sure you check the boxes that you're going to need for the transitional displays located in the center between the preview and the program. Otherwise, you're going to look like this in the basic mode. So advanced and basic switches between those. You can drag this display up and down in the center so that if you want your inputs to size the preview and program panes a little bit differently, if you stretch that up, you can get more room for your buttons. And with regards to the inputs, right-clicking on an input at the top bar will open and close it, so it kind of gets them out of the way. If you're already past them and used them, you can get rid of those inputs for now. And use the tabs up here in the corner. Put names on them that work for you, and then when you pick between these, all you have to do is simply drag these inputs up onto a tab, and what you'll see is the color of that tab located on the input device itself. So if I drag this over an image, it will put a purple box around the little icon there. So that way you can switch between these tabs and be able to quickly find any devices that you might have under those particular labels that you look for during the broadcast.
Yeah, go ahead, Stuart. And by the way, I'm getting a really low resolution. Did that happen for everyone?
We all did.
Yeah,
that was for Leland. Yeah.
And for some reason,
I've got bad bandwidth today, guys. I've been popping in and out of Zoom because of that, so it's not a problem.
Okay, got it. It's super low resolution. It was just hard to. I just didn't know if it was just me. Go ahead, Stuart.
I was actually going to point out the same thing that Leland finished there with the colors and how they appear on the little cogwheel, so you can sort your inputs by group.
Next question.
Chris Fritchie, who's often in the panel, not today, says from Trumbull, Texas, is there a way to view a live vector scope out of a Blackmagic Pocket camera, cinema camera 6K on a separate monitor?
Go ahead, Jason, and then Stuart, and then Mickey.
You can absolutely output, well, not a vector scope, but you can check and choose what you see from the 6K. The difference is that there is no vector scope output. You've got to do that externally.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, I was actually going to point out that Blackmagic do make a range of tools that you can plug in through USB that will do vector scopes for you, and that's probably the best way to do it with that camera.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, there's a good selection as well of standalone, camera-mounted monitors that will show you vector scope, like Blackmagic's own Smart Scope monitor, and also even their video assists, their little 5 or 7 inch monitors.
Does the video assist have a vector scope on it?
Yeah, I just checked the website, and it does have vector, amongst, of course, others like RGB.
The newer
Parade
ones
and all
do.
that.
Make sure it's a newer one.
Yeah, the newer one. Yep. The newer, by the way, the new video assists are kind of insane. Like they're
for the
just
price.
For the price is just an insane. I mean, because they act as a webcam. They basically do the same thing that the ATEM Mini does. Like you just take your video and put it into your monitor and then stream from your monitor.
It'll record SD cards on SD cards. So much can do on those tiny boxes.
Yeah, Bill.
I just wondered if he might have been confused. The histogram that you can call up on Blackmagic cinema cameras, to the best of my knowledge, does not have a separate output. It's just an overlay in the camera.
No. I mean, he's talking a second monitor. I mean, you'd have to get a monitor that can do it itself. The camera doesn't do vector scope output, but but you'd have to have a monitor that is able to generate that from the input. And I have to admit that a vector scope is not something I use much anymore. I use a lot of other tools. It's just, when the reason that I used it a lot in the past was to match cameras to a known value with something like a Dumont chart. so you have a known input and then use the vector scope to look at that known output. But I have to admit that now there's so many other ways of viewing the color that I've kind of not used it as much in the past. Go ahead, Roscoe, and then Leland.
Well, you're not baking in the color either, really. You just have to make sure you're filtering to the
well,
same.
you are if you're living. If you're live, you're baking it in. Like it's going out to the live show. So you do have to get them to match in that. But again, I match the cameras to each other, and I just have different ways of doing it, which we'll talk about soon. Leland?
I was just going to say, if they could bring the HDMI output out of the camera into vMix, you can, on the program out feed, show the vector scope alongside of the video. That'd be the only way.
There's a lot of software that can do it. If you're looking for just a monitor that does it, you have to look for the feature set. And again, the assist is probably the easiest one. And then if you go out to software, there's tons of things that'll make that available. Let's go to the next question.
Moving on to Tony Mobley, our friend from Atlanta, Georgia, or Newman, Georgia, actually. Should I purchase a small 19-inch 1080p TV as output monitor for ATEM? Space is my issue. Existing monitor will be a secondary monitor for Zoom OSC.
Go ahead, Jason.
I recommended one that actually arrived last week that if you give me a minute, I can run and get, but 1080p, $120, Visa mount, full HDMI input, and it looks great. So no, my answer would be no. Do your very best to get one that's portable.
Go ahead, Mickey.
I just want to say, like, look at Tony 6 months ago.
Yeah, Tony's building it out. It's
come
really
so
great.
far, man.
I know. He's just cranking. No, absolutely.
But yeah, Tony, there's never enough monitors of all kinds.
Yeah.
Audio or video monitors.
It depends on what your output is there. If you are trying to just see like a multi-view, the other thing we've used for those, if you're just looking for a very tiny multi-view, the Lilliput's at 11 inches or 10 inches or whatever we've used. You can't check focus that way, but you can see what you're doing. So that's another option. Jeffrey?
You also mentioned that it's 19 inches, and I know the portables only go up to 15.6 inches. So I don't know if that's something that you need. You're considering to get the larger TV for. Something for a wall mount then would probably be the best thing. And if you're putting it onto like a desktop, you might want to think about getting a monitor arm as opposed to using the monitor stand that you have.
Which gets back into almost always I'll get a Visa. Something like that's one of the minimum requirements for me to buy a monitor as a Visa mount. Like I don't buy anything I can't attach to things. Mickey?
Yeah, definitely a Visa mount. And also, if you're willing to spend a bit more, Tony, there's a couple of monitors from the likes of Dell and Samsung, and I'm sure there are other manufacturers as well that they're large monitors, maybe 4K monitors, but they have multiple inputs. And now each quadrant of that 4K screen could be sourced from a separate HDMI source. So one monitor could serve four outputs if you want to. So that's an option as well.
Go ahead, Jeff, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, that actually was going to be my suggestion. Was ICANN has one. I bought one, and now I have 5 because they're just so handy. 27 inches, and you can put four monitors into it. And the picture, it's a 4K monitor, so it's actually quite good.
And who makes it again?
ICANN. IKAN.
Yep. That's great. Next question.
Roscoe Jones is in with, what is the use for SRT versus NDI in cloud-based video switching? Are there any new virtual video standards on the horizon?
Go ahead, Jeff.
I'm not sure about what you mean by virtual video standards, but the difference between SRT and NDI, SRT is it's more like RTMP, that it's a streaming format from getting point A to point B, but there's a higher latency in it. NDI is, and it's compressed. SRT is, of course, quite compressed. While NDI is compressed also, it's a lighter compression. And an NDI has 1 frame of latency in a local environment or cloud environment within local machines within your virtual production cloud. So speed, that's the biggest difference. And because of jitter and the transport mechanism of using an NDI for long distances, not just in your virtual cloud, the NDI will not do well going over long distances because it's a higher bandwidth and also just in general how it's expecting to deliver. But SRT can go long distances, and you could get it down to pretty decent, but it's a higher latency.
Go ahead, Andy.
definitely think we could stand to deep dive SRT at some point, but the thing to keep in mind, I think, with SRT is that when you're using it for streaming video, it's running with that MPEG TS inside of it, and that's when I think it's similar to RTMP. But SRT itself, I would argue, is more similar to something like UDP, where it's really just about that socket, and then you can push a lot of different stuff through it. And that's in our workflow, that's how we push metadata up to the cloud. In addition to the video streams, we'll have a different way of getting it up there, which we could do it with the NDI metadata. But if you look at how like the Sienna cloud processing engine works, it's actually just pulling the video right out of the NDI source and packing it into SRT, as well as some of those metadata fields. So it's very creative, but it allows you to do a couple different things that you might not want to do to beam up from just NDI.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times I think of SRT as the contribution platform, a contribution source like Zixi. Zixi and SRT are kind of like in the same world from my perspective. And I would, if I was going to list it, I would say there's RTMP as a contribution, and a considerable step up from RTMP from a stability perspective, but a higher latency is SRT, and then a smaller step up to Zixi from our experience in testing between the different platforms. But once you get into the network, then you use NDI to move between them once you're in the cloud. Next question.
Talak Lopez Waterman, our friend from the OSC stuff. As we look at Zoom OSC workflows, I'm wondering if one wanted to control the sound of all the participants in the gallery view on a panel the size of office hours. Does there need to be one Zoom OSC Pro account or 20 plus? With my work with it, I think it's the latter, but he wanted to confirm that.
Go ahead, Andy.
So you'd want to rent the 20 plus for that. If you want the full remote control, you'll want to spin up a rental for that. To be able to get all of those endpoints uniquely controlled. If you want to be able to do what you were doing in Discord the other day with the actual sliding their volumes up and down.
Great. Next question.
Greg Yotes of Gridley, Kansas says, what's the most direct path to go from a wireless remote camera on the premises into an ATEM Mini? The camera doesn't need remote control, just fixed lens, zoom, focus, and exposure.
Go ahead, Mickey.
I think what's most popular nowadays on sets and productions has been the Teradek systems.
Say it again. Oh, Teradek.
Yeah, Teradek.
Yeah, I mean Teradek, the bolts, for that, bolts are a pretty popular one. I mean, there's a lot of other ones. There's Hillywood, I think, or Hollywood.
Yeah, there's Hollyland, I think.
Hollyland makes transmitters that we've seen some people work on a little more cost effective, but the ones that we've used have been primarily in the small environments, have been all the Teradeks, and then we kind of there's bigger versions of that, but they get to be pretty pricey. But Teradeks are pretty solid. The only thing I'll say is don't rent Teradeks. So the thing about Teradeks is that so I've owned a lot of bolts and I've rented bolts. I'd say my success rate of renting a bolt from someone like VER is about 20%. Like I always rent two. Even if I want one, I rent two of them. I have very low trust in. The problem is it's really easy for people to put Teradeks into a state that is hard to get out of. Especially in production. And I've had ones where I literally sent them back to VER couldn't figure it out. So that, and so they'd send them back to Teradek. I mean, that's the kind of thing that I'm, that low level, whatever they're doing can get really jacked up by users. And so you're better off owning those than to rent them. Go ahead, Guy.
Sounds like he's getting a drift due to a sync issue as far as the 48K versus 44, as I read that question. If he's drifting from the audio sync to dropping it into the
am I
actually sorry, I read the next one. Sorry.
Okay. I was like, I have no idea what Guy is talking about yet. Go ahead. Guy is answering in the future. Go ahead, Jeffrey, and then Jason.
Well, the other thing is we need to know what wireless camera you're talking about, because if you're talking about a security camera, that's a whole different beast as opposed to an actual camera on a some sort of wireless system or a or anything like that. So that we need to know that.
Okay, go ahead, Jason.
This is a Raven Eye from DJI, and I want to say they're maybe $150 or so. They work pretty well. The caveat, though, is that your receiving end is going to be an iOS or an Android device. So you basically plug this into the camera, HDMI, and it's using Wi-Fi downlink. Quality is acceptable for streaming. I wouldn't use it for anything really high end.
Next question.
Moving on to Lawrence W. And Guy, don't worry, you were just thinking faster than the speed of light. That was the only problem. So here we are. We've caught up with you. Is there a trick to making the audio from a standalone recorder sync perfectly to camera audio for long recordings? The audio from our Zoom H2 microphone recorder drifts about 1 frame's worth every 30 seconds in our video editor's timeline. And he's a newbie on a budget.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's a difference between 44.1 and 48 or even 32. As long as you match those up, you shouldn't get drift. I mean, you might get a little bit, but not as extreme as what you're referring to. So look at your camera's frame rate and then look at your audio recorder's kilohertz, what it's recording in.
And it could be, sometimes that drift, it wouldn't be 30 minutes wouldn't be the right increment, but it could also be drop frame versus non-drop. Is a place where you see that, and you can actually, there is wave agent from sound devices can actually correct that, so you can actually, because it's not really losing any data, you can change that numbering there as well. Go ahead, Jason.
No, you pretty much covered it.
Okay, next question.
Moving on to Marcus, looks like Reithieli, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, from Sweden. What's your take on using OBS Ninja in real production environments?
Anyone using OBS Ninja in real production environments? Go ahead, Jeff.
Done some testing with it. It is pretty amazing for not especially the cost, but it depends what you're seeing as production environments. If you're going to broadcast, that's one thing. If you're going to streaming, that's another. You've got different standards to meet. So does it work? Pretty much. Yeah, it does what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think OBS is a great cost-effective solution to get started. I think that's how I would kind of describe it. It's not super expensive. It's easy to get into, and you can use it as you start. When you say real production, usually that, in my mind, usually moves past OBS, and you're going somewhere other than that when you're talking about real production. Next question.
Nick Bacon of presumably Richmond, Virginia, says, seeing a lot of conversation about remote production kits like Crew in a Box. If you could design a remote production kit prioritizing number 1, user friendliness, and number 2, image quality, what would you put in it?
Well, those two things, as someone who does design those kits, and we send out probably on average 40 to 50 kits a month of different sizes. What you're asking, user friendliness and image quality, often compete with each other dramatically. So they tug. The higher you want the image quality to be, the less user friendly it will be. Crew in a Box is interesting. Obviously, we spent a lot of time looking at it. It looks cool. It's pretty slick and easy to open. Here are the problems with Crew in a Box specifically as a user friendly device. Number 1 is the light is too close to the camera, so you're lighting straight on. This is like a passport photo type light, so it's nice and big, but it's coming right from behind the camera. That'll also make it a little harder to read the teleprompter, is going to be my guess that they have there, because that light is really close. So if they put the light up enough to compete with an environment, it'll be hard to see the teleprompter in view. They're using a 6K camera. We use 6K cameras, so it's the same thing. The other problem is that it doesn't have a tripod, and it's just like something you're going to set on your desk. Just having a camera that you're going to set on something is great if you just want a star to come in and be there, kind of, not really, but you're going to limit where you can put it in someone's average house, because now they're going to have to go find a coffee table or something else or whatever they're going to do. So I think that it serves a use if you want general contribution, into something of like, hey, it's, Beyonce and she's coming in from her house or whatever. I think that could work pretty well. I think that if you want something that's really, truly a high-end solution. So I feel like they're almost overshooting. I think the 6K camera as a contribution is almost overkill for what the box will produce, in my opinion. I think it's slick looking, but I think that there are a bunch of limitations to that will be, complicated. Go ahead, Jeff.
Has anybody else seen that? It was a Facebook ad that I came across, and it was they termed it robot, but it was a similar concept, but it was a box more or less like a vertical flight case. The lid flipped back, and it was a UE150, I believe, a Panasonic UE150, which is 10 grand all by itself. And then it would telescope up and then or down, whichever. And then you had audio inputs, and I think it had a ring light, which was kind of a weird placement where it was. It wasn't exactly what I'd call effective. And I think that's a big part of these kits is they're trying to put it all in one, but all in one doesn't always work in every scenario.
Yeah, I think that this gets back into it's easy to create content or easy to watch it, but hard to do both. And the more you create a user, the more you make it user friendly. And we do that. We send stuff out. Okay, we're not going to do that. We're going to send some webcams and we're going to send a couple little lights. And we think a lot about user friendliness in that process. The kit that we send out that would compete with this kit does take the user about 40 minutes to put together. Like it's not, but it's got little guides and things, and they can put it up it's not something that just pops out of a box, pops out of 3 Pelican cases. So I think that, but we have a lot, we have the same control that they have, but I would argue that ours looks better. Like the end product will look better than what you get there, and that's what we're prioritizing. Go ahead, Bill, and then Jeffrey. Relatively quick.
The first thing I'd look for is just make sure there's some form of audio decoupling. There's nothing that drives me more crazy than somebody putting a camera or something like that with the camera mic on their desk, and then they're tapping the desk.
Well, they have to stay focused with Crew on a Box. They definitely have a lav set up. I mean, they have a plug-in. They have a we'll just keep the conversation really so that they do have a way to put that to have a lav as an option. In Crew in a Box, we spend a lot of time studying it. So you definitely. But to your point, that point is keeping it on the box it will be painful. Go ahead, Jeffrey, real quick.
First of all, Brian has Brian's in Discord. He's got a similar setup that is a little bit different. I'm actually building something not for streaming but for recording. That's phone based, and basically I'm going to support into it and then hit the record button and then copy the files over. That's how we're going to do it. So it really depends on how you want to
we record all
we
record all the audio and video directly to the box, and then we pick up the box and we take the content out because you can't stream 6K yet. Next question.
Moving on to Jonas Dattel, our friend from in Germany. We did a live stream yesterday where we enabled the captions in the YouTube settings and send them via OBS as 608, but YouTube never showed the CC, closed caption button. I worked on tests for hours before. Any ideas how to fix that?
If YouTube doesn't show the CC button, you either haven't activated it or you haven't, or it's not getting them. But generally, if YouTube, with YouTube, if you set up CC and it has to get them and it has to be set there. So you have to make sure that you're set to 608, which it sounds like you were, but there's 2 options, of course. There's HTTPS and then there's 608, 708. And you have to pick the right one to do that. And then once you pick it, it's going to wait to see it. So if it's not coming through OBS, it's not showing up on YouTube. I will say that the YouTube 608, 708 is pretty wonky. So like the HTTP input is actually much more stable than the 608, 708. The reason we use 608, 708 mostly is so that if we're streaming to lots of different channels or Facebook or Twitter or other things, we can put the same signal onto an SDI signal and get it to everything and stream it all out. But it's not, it can get caught up, and you may have to play with it a little bit. I'd have to know how you're getting the 608 into OBS. So that's the other thing is OBS getting that 608 from somewhere? And the only thing that we've been repeatedly successful with on a 608 is a EEG 492. So that's the thing that would consistently works, and we've not had anything else consistently work. Next question.
Comes in from Rick Coombs of Columbia, Tennessee, and he asks, I thought at one time I heard Alex say that there would be a session on the process of how to spin up a virtual instance in AWS. Is this in the works, or was I dreaming?
It is. It is. We're gonna do more on virtual production. One thing is important is that if I say something in the show, it's important to put it into the second hour in Discord. I won't remember in the show. So if you see something and go, oh, we should do a second hour. If I say, well, we should do a second hour, it's important to put it in the list, because when I'm thinking of second hours, I'm going through that list. And so, but we'll definitely get something up. What I want to do is do some very basic stuff on AWS, probably next week. And it'll just be the basic setup of how to get a link or RTMP or something into AWS and stream it. That's kind of hello world, and then we'll start talking about, we'll kind of do a series. We're talking to AWS about doing something once a month, just to keep on, Q&A and then also, like how to do more in AWS, because I think it's important as well. Next question.
Orion Z. Slaters, and what's the second or third question from London? Any programs that are particularly good for automatically responding to OSC feedback? Anyone got a particular favorite?
Go ahead, Andy.
So as you've seen, I tend to use Isadora, but there are plenty of other ones that you could use. You could consider Max, or what used to be called Max MSP. It and Isadora are very similar. Isadora is more artsy and sort of out there, and Max is very has a higher barrier to entry, but it's very, very horizontal in terms of its build out. So those would be sort of the ones that I see in the field most often. And that would be for, making those associations between incoming and outgoing. Something like Qlab, that you can do it in a basic sense where you can tell Qlab the go for my next trigger is going to be this OSC command, and then that all your queues could be OSC outputs, so you can kind of hack it that way. But it's not really designed to be pulling in fields from incoming OSC and modifying queues and things like that.
Next question.
Comes from Gert Maihai, I believe, from Oudhaverly, Belgium. I'm learning to program M-stick tiny computers after seeing Aaron Parecki's video on the ATEM tally. I'm thinking of an automatic ATEM camera switcher based on the presenter's position by using the compass. Would this be useful in real life?
Yes. So there are gaze trackers. What you're looking for is gazing trackers. So you can tell you're not really interested in their position. You're interested in where they're looking. So what the trackers will do is they'll identify a face and they'll look at where the eyes are looking. And those are getting down to relatively inexpensive. I've done a little bit of research with them. The primary place that I've been looking at using them is for a presenter who's a teacher, who, when I look down, I want you to cut to what I'm looking at. When I look up, I want you to cut to me. And so the idea is that the teacher, instead of having to think about it, just looks down and immediately it cuts to what their workspace is, and then they look up and that's something that can be done. And so I've had ones working in pieces, but it's an interesting way to kind of manage that. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a lot of classroom recording or virtual classroom, or we used to call it distance learning systems, that do these types of things. It's expensive to put someone out there to do a live switch for a class. So, but Mevo, had a system where they're taking 4K and downsampling to 820. Really, what the Facebook portal now does is pretty useful. It just doesn't change the angles. So that's really what I guess you're trying to do.
We'll have more to talk about that in the future. This is a good time to ask questions. We still got another hour of open questions and not a ton of questions. So if you've got questions, go ahead and throw them out there. Next question.
Next question comes from David Brady in New York. Struggling to manage multiple computers in my limited space office. He uses a combination of Synergy for single keyboard mouse control and VNC access for the computers behind me or in other parts of his apartment. He's curious to understand or learn what space-saving solutions others are using.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
I think you're really on the right track. I think both of those work extremely well. Maybe consolidate your monitors, maybe try to wall mount them, get everything all along one plane. Other than that, I mean, I don't know what else to tell you. Rack your computers, put them in a closet.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Stuart, and then Jeff.
One thing I've noticed about using VNC is network bandwidth is important to get the best performance out of it, and don't expect it to work perfectly smoothly if you're moving video or large sections around on the computer that you're controlling remotely.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Before too long, you'll find either the investment in a true KVM type setup from Adder, Black Box. We used we used both of them actually, but Adder's been my favorite in the last few truck builds that we've done, and it's life changing just to be able to sit there on one keyboard and mouse and go to any computer that's in the truck, and they're just racked in a rack, so I don't care. But then I've got that one segment of my monitor. I use a quad split 4K monitor from LG, so I can still see all I want to see on the other three quadrants, but then I have that one quadrant that just switches, and so then I could access any of the computers, just button presses like that. The next step, if you don't want to go that route, I would drop VNC for access inside, install NDI tools on everything, put NDI tools on everything, and run Studio Monitor on the machine that you want to control the other ones with the scan converter running on them. You have a free KVM available with just NDI tools. Just download it and install it on everything, and the quality is substantially better than VNC or any other remote control. But that's only on your local LAN. Keeping that in mind.
Next question.
Moving on to Mike Henderson, and Mike is coming to us from Colorado. Mike asks, is there a SmallRig accessory or other brand that would allow me to connect a Zoom recorder with 2 wireless microphone packs to create a handheld rig? Quarter 20 on the Zoom recorder, cold shoe on the 2 microphone packs.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
There is not a single device that is used for this. Your best bet, if you want a handheld rig, is going to be something that takes, cold shoe, so you can put it into a camera that, is kind of like an arc. I found that those work pretty well. A circle or a pentagon, and you'll put the Zoom in the middle, and then you'll put your wireless body packs along the side, antennas facing back or forward, depending. And that's how you do it. And it's really just kind of piecemeal. That's the way I've had it done.
All right, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily do this on a camera that is like standalone without a rod system, because you would find it a bit more difficult to do something handheld. So if you have a rig that has a rod system wherein you can counterbalance things on the back, you can buy little cheese plates that can clamp on the rod, and those cheese plates have a lot of quarter 20 or 5/8 threads as well. And you can mount a lot of stuff however you want with whatever mounting tools you want to use.
Go ahead, Bill, and then Jeffrey.
So I did this weird thing a couple of years ago at NAB because I wanted a remote rig that I could carry around. And basically it's 2 AVX receivers into a Saramonic rig that transfers to lightning into the iPhone. And that's on like a photographic little mount I found with a padded handle, and it all worked real well for me. So surprisingly, sometimes you just go out there into the places like MarkerTech and things like that and just scout around till you find a system you can put together. That actually worked remarkably well for me for a whole set of interviews at NAB.
Go ahead, Jeffrey, and then Stuart.
Yeah, I got a nice little rig. I was talking about my remote system. I'm not going to show it here, but I'll show it on screen. It's from Newer, and it might be something that you can use. And the best part about this is if you flip it upside down, you're going to get a whole bunch more screw hole mounts options if that is how you want it to work. Otherwise, you can put the device on the bottom and put all your stuff on the top.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Okay, it's really going through the SmallRig parts bin, but you'll need a couple of the wooden handles that look like that. And then grab one of the cages for something like the ATEM Shogun, mount your Zoom to that, and then the handles to the outside of it, and you should be able to find some hot shoes there. I'm having a look at the SmallRig website at the moment, and if I find the pieces that I'm thinking of, I'll put a link in the chat.
I was trying to find a picture of we had a rig that we built that was, I think I've showed in the past, that was similar to that. K-Tech used to make a rig that it was I can't remember what it was, but it was like a little box, and it had a mixture of cold shoe mounts as well as
the Norbert.
The Norbert, that was it. And I think I still have a couple of Norberts around, and it was exactly what you're looking for. Like, I mean, if you want a shoulder mount, then it's not. But if you wanted like a handheld we used to do it with phones, and we have exactly what Bill was talking about. We'd have Ceramonic, input, and we'd have the 2 wireless mics, and we'd have all of it in a light and everything else, all built out around a handheld piece. But the K-Tech Norbert was a great little tool. Next question.
Moving on to Tony Mobley of Newman, Georgia. There is a lot of conversation about vMix and Zoom OSC. As a Mac user, I want to use Mimo Live. Is there any solution or another solution for Mac users specifically?
You go ahead, Roscoe.
Well, you can go back in time, and maybe before Mimo Live, there was Boinks TV, and there's a thing called Mac Heist, which every now and then would come out with some sort of software switcher for the Mac, but every time I'd try them, most of the time they were kind of junky, and that's why they weren't well supported or well used.
Is there a communication platform with Mimo Live? I think that there is. It may not be OSC though. I think that's the issue. Is that there's not an OSC connection, Andy?
Right. So this is something that we see on a couple of different switchers. They don't have the OSC input, but they do have like an API. So it could be something we could explore, trying to build something specific for it. What I would say is with tools like vMix and potentially Mimo Live, I was actually just talking about this in the Discord the other day. I think of my Zoom sources as PTZ cameras that can move to different participants, right? And then they can move to a gallery shot if it's, the primary display. And when I think about it that way, I hook up certain controls to the switcher, and I hook up different controls to Zoom OSC. That's basically like piloting that camera. And I think you could probably build something like that would give you a good workflow, but it wouldn't require you to have a direct OSC integration going into Mimo.
Go ahead, John Middleton. Did you have your hand up? No.
Oliver likes to use X keys, but he has some communication you could do. So I think reach out to Oliver, and he's very responsive.
We should all reach out to Oliver and say, hey, we really want to use OSC. Can you make that work? Let's see if we can't, kind of flush the system. All right, next question.
James Babbitt here in San Diego says, have you noticed a change in quality in Zoom meetings? The video often seems sharper even without using the Facebook portal.
I think in general, we're getting more bandwidth from Zoom. Our meetings get better because we've been upgraded. But I think that more and more people are getting upgraded. More and more people are seeing that. I do think that I have felt like for the most part, we're seeing better quality out of Zoom. Has anyone else had that experience? Does it seem for us, those of us who've been upgraded, looks great.
Since the day the upgrade happened, it's been unbelievably good. You just need the sustained upstream to get it right and to stay right.
Hey, go ahead, Jeff.
I had just the opposite experience this weekend running a virtual event, and I could never get it over 720, and they swore to me their count was 1080 up and down, and even the 720 didn't look good. And I know they were producing in 4K, but we had a lot of other challenges. It was actually based, the company was based in a home, so their studio was in a home, and it was in the middle of a residential area, somewhere out in the LA area. And so they had no choices of just like, it was Comcast, that was it. And so they were worried about the dropout of that, and because they were always having problems with it anyway, so they put in a wireless link, and I just think that just killed our video quality going up. And I just didn't see it. I was very, and they mentioned it to me too. It's like, it just didn't look as good as it did last time. I'm like, I agree, but we did everything we possibly could.
The one thing I will say is that 1080p, what I've seen change in 1080p in the last month is that when we started doing a lot of 1080p stuff, we found that it was very unforgiving. So you hear clicking, it would drop frames and so on and so forth. And so the 1080p, I was kind of like, was this a good idea for me to even go for 1080p, because I would have breakups in Zoom. Now I'm having a lot less of that now, but what I see is it shifts down to 720 if it has any issue at all. So what it appears to me is that Zoom is now basically getting more conservative. Oh, this person can't really handle that. So if it has any anomaly, like I'll see a click in somebody in 1080p, and then they'll be 720p like that, and then they won't come back. Like they're just, like Zoom has given up on them, and just, and so especially with a Comcast, the 1080p is, I think, 6.5 megs is what I'm measuring it. So with a Comcast of 10 up, or it really is like 9.5 up, if anything else was happening in that house, I could see it dropping and then not giving it back. you know, and so
no, that was actually not on theirs. I was live view. I actually fell over to my live view. I gave up on the wireless link was 40, the 30 started out at 30 by 30, and I was getting so much jitter on it. I couldn't use my other encoders, which are NDI cloud encoders. And I ended up falling back to my live view 100%. And that signal going up was 100% 1080p. But once we hit the Zoom rooms themselves, I could just, it just never looked right.
Interesting. Bill, and then Jason.
Well, I don't know if this is directly relevant, but I used to do a lot of work in supply chain for one of my big retail clients. And as I saw them build out their distribution network, they would constantly be every couple of months running into a pain point that had to do with their next scale up, 2x, 4x, 6x of their capacity. And those things would last for a couple of months, and then eventually they get around to addressing the pain point and clear up that part of the supply chain. I'm going to give them a break for a little while and hope that as their engineers continue to expand out, they address some of these things that are problems now, but maybe not be problems later. That's how it worked in supply chain. Maybe it'll work that way with Zoom and electronic distribution, because this is scaling so fast.
Go ahead, Jason.
Jeff, if I'm remembering correctly, now your Facebook post over the weekend makes a lot more sense to me. But yeah, how do I put this? If you want 1080, you need at least 30 up sustained, because that means you'll actually get 20 up sustained. And I have very little sympathy for Comcast. I have a fair bit of sympathy for Zoom because of the speed with which they had to scale. Bandwidth is not an artificially scarce resource. It's not oil. It's not, electricity. It's one of these things that people need to it's just infrastructure.
Good, Kai.
Yeah, if you're doing a lot of these, it's best to get a Zoom room, a proper Zoom room, because even if you're in somebody else's meeting, and I've been keeping an eye on my kids, they are in Zoom every day, and the quality seems to be about the same. So I'm watching their 360p meetings, and I'm just like, man, I wish I could bring in a room. So like I do these coaching calls where the coach will come in and he's in 360p, and I'm like, do you mind if I invite my room real quick? So when you get a proper Zoom room account, you could actually just say invite Zoom room, and boom, you pop other people's meetings to 720p. So it's a nice feature to have. And then I bring in my scopes, and they're like, what in the world is this guy doing? So I come with like all these meters to a meeting. It's kind of fun, but that's
I just love the idea of a PTA meeting with scopes.
1080p PTA.
All right, next question.
Moving along. Michael Fisk of Spokane Valley. What solutions work best to store Apple photos? More importantly, I have tons of multiple duplicates. I struggled with this when I opened iPhotos. Very aggravating. A simple solution would be really helpful.
Good, Roscoe.
$8 duplicate annihilator I think when you buy the photos version, you get the iPhoto version thrown in for free. It's the older version of it. Works well, goes through, finds the duplicates, and will pull them out.
Next question.
Moving on to Dave Chalmers of Glasgow, Scotland. And Dave asks, does anyone have any experience of using Blackmagic multi-dock rack mount SSD drive bays interface? Is it reliable? And he's got a URL link there.
So many jobs. So what we've used those for, and the newer ones are, obviously faster with USB-C, but I've had them since they first came out, is that we have a whole bunch of hyperdecks that we're recording to, and we'll record all those hyperdecks, and then we just start putting them into those docks and pulling, and they'll pull at the speed that, the maximum speed that your target drive will go to. So it's been great for us to be able to grab a whole bunch of stuff and just pull it and push it onto a core drive to work on. You finish a job, and they'll be in our road kits. We've even edited from them. So you have you have the sources. A lot of times it's like clean program, and then a couple of the other sources in one of those units. Plug it into your computer, it just shows up, and those drives show up, and we cut when we're doing a fast turn. We cut the show from those. We've been super successful using them with SSDs. Although now, because I'm using a lot of 6K for records, I just use T5s. But anyway, go, Jason.
Yep, I've got a whole rack of them right over there, and they're great.
Yeah, they work really well. I mean, if that's your pipeline, so if your pipeline is hyperdecks and SSDs and so on and so forth, They work well, and you can have them be JBOD, or you can also RAID. You can make them a RAID if you want, software RAID on the computer.
P.S. Don't do that. Do not RAID your production disks. Please don't do that. Okay, yes.
Okay, next question. We did it just to see if we could do it. We never actually used it for anything. We were just like, can we RAID these? And we're like, yes, we can. All right, go ahead, Bill. Next question.
And, well, can I bounce back just for a second? Michael Fisk asked about duplicate photo things, and I just wanted to provide another alternative. There's a program called TidyUp that I've used for decades that allows you to do a whole bunch of criteria. Is it just the duplicate name? Is it duplicate name and duplicate size? Is it other duplicates? And it'll go through your whole system and find everything photos included that are exact duplicates and give you the option to dump all but one, just one, whatever you want. So that's another utility to be helpful.
Next
Okay,
question.
moving on to Sky Gleason now of Seattle. Filmic Pro, what's the quickest way to offload footage off of an iPhone 12? AirDrop is one slow and one at a time painful.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
OWC has an app called Copy That. That's pretty good.
Go ahead, Fenwick.
It may be slow, but it doesn't have to be one at a time. You can AirDrop multiple things and just walk away from it and let it go.
From inside Filmic Pro, I can click. I can't seem to find how to check multiple items.
Inside Filmic Pro. I know that you can turn on
Filmic Pro will save them to your iPhoto, to your photo library.
Yeah, you have to turn on that option.
Oh yeah. So save it.
That
Save
will
it.
help.
Yeah, definitely save it to your photo library, and then at that point you can also just plug it into you can plug it in and plug your iPhone into your computer, and then just pull everything off of it from through the Lightning, and that's going to be the fastest way to get them off the drive. Yeah.
Copy that.
Go ahead. And also, if it's going to your photo library, if you're connected to Wi-Fi and so on and so forth, and it's powered up, it'll be doing it while you're shooting. It's pushing it up to the library. The only thing to be careful of is the harder part is if you're shooting and you want to use the HDR, it's a little bit more complicated. You really have to pull it from the hardware. It's a long story, but anyway, Jeffrey and then Mickey.
Thank you.
And Jason.
Another thing, you're talking about the hard cable, but if you can't do the cable into the computer, SanDisk makes this. It's called the iExpand, and it's basically a dual drive with a Lightning side on one and then USB-A on the other. If you're going iPad and you decide and you have a USB-C, they also make a dual drive, USB-C to USB-A. That could help.
Jason and then Nikki.
Yeah, one of the issues with AirDrop is that it is, because of the way that it works, because it's so flexible, because it's so convenient, it is going to be beholden to a whole bunch of things about your network that you can't consider to be reliable unless you really have unless you have a lot going for you. And I won't get more into that. The OWC app is going to do the transfer the fastest possible way. That's all there is to it.
Is that in Makana? Did somebody drop that in there?
Mickey?
Yeah, I did.
Thank you.
Yeah, question. Does anyone know if the Lightning connector on the iPhone 12 still runs on USB 2 or is it now USB 3? Because I found on my end, at least, well, sort of older devices, that syncing podcasts and videos and all that has been a lot faster on via Wi-Fi than on the USB 2 Lightning connector. And although that's with a relatively nicely spec'd wireless network.
Stuart and then Jason.
Okay, I've got to ask and remember I'm not an Apple person. Can't you just eject the SD card and copy it across?
Yeah, there you go. Jason?
Sorry, Stuart, pretty good. All right, to answer Mickey's question, I get the sense that they are goosing the pins because, of course, Lightning is a proprietary thing. I'm not actually sure, but it's been my experience that if you plug directly in, especially with Lightning to USB-C, they're doing something to make the hard cable connection faster. And I'm not exactly sure what.
I do think it's the fastest way to get stuff off the computer is Lightning to USB-C. I've definitely had it be faster than doing it over Dropbox or wireless. Next question.
Okay, I'm moving on. And Dave Chalmers, I'm sorry, I got a little confused about yours, but I'm bringing it back. So for right now, Rick Coombs of Columbia, Tennessee, we have a Canon Vixia HF G50, and I'm happy with the quality of the camera. It outputs 1080p, which is fine. The problem is when the person moves, it seems to be tearing. What is a better camera at about the $1,500 range?
Go ahead, Stuart.
Okay, first thing I've got to ask is, Rick, do you have the camera in interlaced or progressive? Is it 50i or 50p? Because you shouldn't be getting tearing in the image unless you've got it in interlaced. But in that sort of range, you're spoiled for choice in camcorders these days, and you pretty much can't go wrong.
Yeah, I think that the way that the Vixia does progressive is that kind of frame doubling. So it sometimes records. I don't know. I haven't used one recently, but I know that for a while it would record in progressive, but it's doing a PSF. So basically it's recording it, but what comes out the back is interlace. So I'm not certain whether they fixed that or not. I know we stopped using them because of that. Go ahead, Jason.
Okay, this is one of these deceptive things where I'm going to assume that you mean you want something that will actually work instead of, just, $1,000 for the camera body and $700 for the lens. If you want an all-in-one that'll do 4K, but can also just, right out of the gate work, the Sony FDR AX53 is a fantastic all-in-one compact camera.
And the again, I think by the way, if you can take that to just finish my answer there, you can do PSF and then have a converter that reads PSF and outputs progressive. So like a little decimator or whatever will read the PSF, but it's coming out as interlace designed to be put back together. And so PSF is the way that Sony kind of worked around it in the early days. And then this is the way. So you may be able to convert it, but I will say at $1,500, you're dangerously close to a Blackmagic 6K. Which is my favorite camera that I've ever owned. Like I just have to say, like if you're shooting stuff, it is just literally. I've owned a lot of cameras. I spent a lot of money on cameras, probably 50 of them. And
don't get me wrong, I love this one. The problem is you're going to get past so quickly. You're going to get past the price limit.
Yeah, but I'm just saying at $1,500, if I was buying a camera, I'd look at it pretty hard, depending on what you're trying to shoot, because it's just an amazing little camera. Next question.
Okay, I put back Dave Chalmers' question, and it's under my name, and it shouldn't be. It was his question of Glasgow, Scotland. Does anyone have any experience using the Blackmagic multi-dock rack mount SSD drive bay interface?
Didn't we just talk about this?
Well, I thought we did, but he thought I missed.
No, we did.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what's going on.
Don't make a raid out of it.
Okay. Terry Donor asks, what tools do you use to monitor network bandwidth by application on Mac and Windows? Is it doable with Activity Monitor, but a little awkward? For example, how much bandwidth is a particular NDI link using?
Go ahead, Jeff.
NDI analysis tool, downloadable for free on the NewTek website, and that will tell you every piece of information you need to know about what a NDI pathway is doing, both on bandwidth, format, everything. It is like reading the matrix screen, though, just so you know. It is not going to be nice and pretty. You got to dig in deep and ask questions, but it does work really well.
Next question.
Moving on to Jeff.
I'm sorry, Jason. I meant to say Jason. Sorry.
All good. So here's another benefit to a Ubiquiti hardware switch. You could actually look at the real-time per switch bandwidth and down to the per port bandwidth use for every port that is plugged directly into the switch. And you could actually do that over the web if you wanted to.
One of the things that I have on all the computers that I do production on is iStat menu as well. It's not as detailed, it's not as there, but as being able to just look up and see, oh, I'm using this much bandwidth is useful. Like it's not, again, it's not going to be, that's not the production for production. We rely on our Meraki switches much in the way that Jason relies on Ubiquiti switch, of being able to really have the router know what's going on inside of it and being able to see that bandwidth. And we watch, like, for instance, we're doing internet fallover tests and so on and so forth. We can sit there and watch the cross and see where it went and see how it managed it. And so those are all things that we use. But I would recommend, if you have a Mac, iStat menu is something you should just kind of consider. You should just put on your machine. Anyway, next question.
Panelist Jeff Keithley from Texas, as he mentioned earlier, what's the best channel in Discord to post for help in testing a new contribution solution? He needs many, 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 many people at once. And there's got to be a talent agent play there for just somebody to assemble Zoom panels and rent them to people.
Yeah, exactly. I've used I need help, to do that, and put it up there. But I think that, and I've always gotten 6 or 8. I haven't really tried to get more than that. We probably ought to think of maybe even a channel that just said looking for Zoom participant or looking for virtual participants is probably its own little channel that we could build into that. Go ahead, Mickey.
Well, I'll post something in the I need help just to have it there.
Yep. Mickey?
Yeah, when you post it in I need help, also mention in that message that Andy Carluccio will be there and you'll get a whole swath of people.
That's right. Andy's the draw.
Yeah, exactly. Next question.
Carol Herndon of Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina says vMix has the ability to use a PowerPoint file as a source. For Wirecast is the only solution to import each slide as an image file.
We lost Jeffrey. Jeffrey's our in-house Wirecast expert. And also, by the way, for everyone, we'll probably go short this week today if we don't get some more questions. So this is a good time to ask some and just let you know. I think that the only way that I've ever done it with Wirecast is stills, to bring them in. I don't think I can run a PowerPoint slide as a source into that. And I'm curious with vMix if anyone's done it where it's been like the PowerPoint is run the way it's supposed to. Like, does it actually run with the animations in vMix as a source? I think it's just that it's a package for stills. I'd be surprised if it actually played back well, but we don't have anyone here right now that could tell us, I don't think. I would say I wouldn't do that. Anyway, Stuart and then Guy.
I would like to know why Jeffrey is smiling, or Jeff is smiling so much when you said about the PowerPoint display in vMix. What's the goss, Jeff? You got to tell us.
Nothing. Can't say nothing. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, the way that we do it is we use vMix capture and then float it over, so you get all your animations and everything. So you have a separate machine running the PowerPoint, and then you use vMix capture. It shows up on the network, and then you get everything nice and crisp and clean.
That'd be, and then you could do that, and you could probably you could do that with Wirecast in another way. But trying to run it inside, I think, would be not something I'd recommend. But definitely running it as a side chain in a separate computer can get out to anything. If you want to use your PowerPoint slides to do that. Next question.
Jim Wilkins in Marblehead, Massachusetts says, has anyone used Virtual Video Director to switch cameras automatically? And if so, what'd you think?
Virtual Video Director. And I have to admit that I am not, I'm not familiar with it. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
I believe that's like an add-on, if I remember right, from DWAM on the other boards, but Kiliom, I believe is his first name. I believe it's an add-on for vMix, isn't it? I'm pretty sure it is, but it's just basically doing noise gates in the simplest form of it. Basically, it's doing noise gates and triggers to whatever is talking. I actually built a hardware system for the Video Toaster 4 at the time, and I was using hardware gates and then flipping between inputs using GPIO, and I've duplicated the similar things down the road. Now it's built in the software. It's easy enough. But yeah, it's just pulling by, but you can do it by timing. Actually, Sienna in their processing engine has a similar type of module that can control external switchers or its own virtual mixer too. I don't use it in production though. That's just a toy.
We've used them a little bit when we've had a lot of panels to cover all at one time. You get 10 rooms or 15 rooms, and it's just easier to let it, and it's hard to find that many TDs that will do any better than the machine will. And so the there are so that auto switching can be useful. The real trick with auto switching is attack and decay. Is that it you don't want it to be on a hair trigger. It gets super, it can get very tweaky. You also want what we call soft controls, which is that this gets into kind of an implicit control of the cameras. So you have instead of a TD cutting every camera, the TD is telling the computer who to focus on. So you just go, these 2 people, and these 3 people, this 1 person, and you're just kind of tapping on it, and the computer auto switches only between the people that you're handing it to. When you do that, it's actually a pretty relaxing experience, and the computer will go faster than the human. And there's actually an energy there that you can't get with a human because they just can't move as fast as the computer can. But you have to be able to dial all those things in. Go ahead, Roscoe, and then Andy.
Yeah, it is. It says both vMix and TriCaster, and it says based on audio, fuzzy logic, and machine learning. So,
yep, Andy.
In a few weeks, I'm going to be out of NDA on something that was an installation that was a completely humanless production location that uses this kind of technology. Once we're out of that, I'll share the case study. It's very slick. It is very slick. It's not a person in the whole room. It does productions.
Nice. Next question.
Moving on to Craig K. of Toronto, Canada, who says specifically for Andy, I wasn't able to attend the Saturday session. Is it still possible to get the Zoom OSC 4 link for the upcoming sessions?
So we sent that out this morning. So that went out so if you look at the announcements that you get every morning, and you'll get them the next couple days, you can download. That's the link to sign up for to get the software, as well as the link to the playlist that Andy's put together, as well as a direct link. So there's no registration, because I think that was part of the problem with our seminars. So there's a direct link in the email to get to the meeting this Saturday that you can get into. And I have to talk to Andy about the permissions on that to make sure that but it's a direct link right now into that. And that's in the email that went out to everybody. So there you go. But you can do it. If you want the software, you got until the end of tomorrow. So you got to sign up. Don't dilly-dally. Go find that email and sign up. Next question.
Mickey, who's switching our live show from the Philippines, is in with a question. I just got an email from Frame.io regarding a special event live from Hollywood. The event reads Lights, Camera, Cloud, and has a photo of a Panavized Sony Venice. It also mentions this might change everything. Any speculation on what might be happening between Sony and Frame.io?
What's the date on that?
February 11th.
Yeah, Feb 11 at 11 a.m. Pacific.
We're going to get an opportunity. We'll get an opportunity to have the guys on and talk about it in detail after the event. So I can't comment any further than that. It's cool. So anyway, I think it will be. Anyway, so go ahead, Bill.
I'm not under any NDA, and I know nothing about it, but I just know that Michael Cioni, who used to be very involved in Hollywood upper-end stuff, is now with Frame.io, so I would expect something pretty cool and interesting for those of you in the top ends of the production world.
Yep. Next question.
Okay, Sean Johnson of New York City says, has anyone tried the Facebook portal with WebEx to bump up the resolution there?
No.
There's no help for WebEx.
I mean, WebEx actually, the video quality goes to 720 pretty quickly on WebEx. Unfortunately, everything else stinks. So it's just, I don't mean to be so rough, but wow, they so missed the boat. And so the problem is that there's no, for people like us, we look at it very sideways, because the getting in is a pain. The way it interfaces with cameras is a pain. All the interface that it puts on top of the video is a pain. Everything about it is painful, except for the fact that they're already installed in a bunch of big corporations. Bill, and then Chris.
I was kind of interested. I got a ping the other day, and I guess Apple is now going to kind of virtualize-ish some of their Genius Bar presentations. I got a notice that they're doing online specific training things globally for some of their software and other things, and they're running it via WebEx. So they have a particular interface that I think they've custom done for these, and that's the sign-up portal. So for good or ill or whatever, they're experimenting with WebEx as a training delivery platform.
Chris?
To that, Bill, I think that's just because it's already accepted internally for security reasons. But totally blanked out. Sorry.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I mean, don't forget that Apple has such a massive CDN that they could use any protocol that they wanted and it would look beautiful. So I wouldn't say that. Sorry, what?
Right. It's complicated. Like it would be complicated to use something else if you want to make it fluid. You know that you can, but I don't. Anyway, I think that Chris is probably on the right path there. Go ahead, Chris.
Came to me. It's important to remember the comment about the portal and WebEx. The reason the portal bumps resolution in a Zoom meeting is because the portal is running a variant of the Zoom Room software. And it's really, that's what's doing. It's not that the portal magically bumps resolution on everything. It has to do with the Zoom Room protocol.
Yep. Next question.
Moving on to a question from somebody named Chris Fenwick, coming to us from Sacramento, California.
I don't know if we even need to listen to this guy. I mean, he I don't know.
I would.
His
It's
questions
good.
are all so.
I would. It's really good.
Me to get the hook out. I'll get the hook out.
Okay.
Would love to discuss core training for Zoom operators, something akin to the training levels that Pixel Core once had. Alex?
So, Alex, as I recall, back in the day, one of the things that you talked about with Pixel Core was that it was difficult to find a audio engineer that, say, knew enough to be called an audio engineer or a video switcher or a camera shader or a camera operator. And kind of along the same ways as as many of us are delving into producing virtual events, there's like little things like, I need to know that this person can manage all my playbacks, or, you know, maybe can help. And to be clear, I'm not even certain the best way to do things yet. You know, you have a remote presenter who has a bunch of slides. Should we use a Zoom Room? Should we not use a Zoom Room? Should we use an internet clicker, or should we use Keynote Live? I mean, I think there's a lot of stuff that we just have to narrow down. What is the best way to do this? And I fully understand it's difficult because things change on a monthly basis.
Depends.
Right.
So the thing with Pixel Core is that the challenge is that we started organizing into teams and certification too early. So we ended up with a whole bunch of people that we got really quickly, but we didn't let it grow into its own thing and then start pulling those threads out of the gel, you know, so to speak. And so that was a big problem with the way it was designed, and it was because I was impatient. And so I wanted to build this certification track really quickly, and we had to figure out first how to collect a whole bunch of people and have them self-organize. That's what we should have done. And then we should have, figured out how to get them all into the same kind of group and, let's say, have discussions all the time, like, every day. And then we'd want to start building classes that built a core set of training and so on and so forth that would get everybody on the same playing field in certain things. And then we'd start, as a group, defining what those certifications would be and what those minimum requirements are. So so again, every iteration of this, you make some changes. And so the current experimentation here is that we're probably, to do what you're asking, we're probably 6 months to a year away. So the next step was turning the thing on, but the next step is to start these classes. So Andy's kind of the beginning of that. Resolve, virtual production. There'll be more of those all year. And we're doing a couple things. Is we're kind of building up that expertise, and then as a group we're learning it all together. And then you pull people out. And people show up. They show up on Discord. They show up they show up here in the panel, and that's how you're allowing it to organically find its way there, rather than set it up. You know, and the Pixel Core was successful. I mean, you have guys that, are head of production at Drexel, and you have folks that, have worked in a lot of visual effects. There's a lot of folks that grew up inside of that system and did go up those certifications and then end up in places that were useful. But I think that what I'm doing is trying to patiently kind of move down that path, and let it kind of grow a little bit before we start adding structure to it. So
I think one thing we may all want to think about, and to borrow some of your words, is ball handling skills. And I think that to some extent, I think that we could And maybe that's a subset of us. Maybe some of us want to say, hey, let's work on this thing. As I've said to Andy multiple times, I'm thoroughly intrigued by everything he's doing, but there's a certain advanced level that addresses that I think might be shooting over the bow of some of those ball handling skills that I think we also need to think about at a lower level. Go, Andy. I'm sorry, I'm not running this show. I'll
go ahead, Andy. You go ahead, Andy, and then Roscoe, and then John.
I think that to that point about the higher level engagement, what I'm trying to do with office hours right now, as I'm understanding this training and learning from Alex about what the group needs, is the offline content, the videos that I'm posting. Those are the starting from zero. Those are I show you how to log into a Zoom meeting. I spent a whole video just on that, a video on reading a document, the most basic things I could think of, right? But that is something that is like part of the homework, something to go home with and learn that up. Then when we get together, we can have that higher level conversation. I think the first instance of this is kind of strange because we're all coming together at the first moment, and I need to be able to give folks who are really advanced the information they need to just get running. And then I also need to be able to give folks who need to build up the information about just the basics of navigating the software. So I think it'll be interesting to look as we continue trainings on other programs and products. How do we get that first step, to not overwhelm folks and give them a perception of difficulty of what's going to follow.
And to be clear, I have nothing against what you're doing. I think it's awesome. But I do think that there could be some concerted effort at training people at much more basic things.
Yeah. And
just thought.
Some of it's related to also size. So to do it affordably, we need the membership here to grow about 5 to 10x. Just so you know, that's to make it. Otherwise, I can do it, but it's just expensive. So what I'm trying to, it's expensive for people to sign up for it, which we may do, at some point. But the main thing is that the other thing is that I think that part of this is that while I learned a lot in the various classes that I've taken and everything else, the thing I learned the most of is sitting around people who are doing it and listening to them talk and be a fly on the wall while they're talking about it. And then and sometimes asking questions. At ILM, I learned a lot. In Lucasfilm, I learned more in 3 years than I learned in my entire life about production. And there was no classes. There was just, there was someone, I once asked how Gaussian blur, was calculated, and John Knoll explained it on a whiteboard. Here's here's how Gaussian blur is calculated, because he wrote it. So anyway,
that question though,
because we were arguing about how it was calculated, and it was and we were, you got to remember, when I was in ILM, I was in my 20s. It wasn't like we were I was 28 years old at ILM, and so we were kids that were trying to figure this all out. It wasn't like there was no internet; you couldn't just Google it. There was internet, but you could barely Google it. And so so if you ask the question,
actually at that time there was no Google, so you'd have to go to,
couldn't Google it. So
Ask
there was
Jeeves.
Yahoo, yeah, whatever. So the thing is that a lot of this is again challenging people to work on it, giving them resources to do that, and then answering their questions. And a lot of our training will constantly be that, because it's less than a class. Now, to get to your point, there is another step to that, which is that we define, to run a Zoom, you have these minimum things that you have to be able to do. And so and you need to, and I think of it more as a martial arts solution than I need to see you do it. I don't want any multiple choice questions. You need to go, set up this room, and you have to do it at, for me, muscle speed. I want to see you be able to, you practice it over and over again, and you just go, and you knock it out. But it's very much like a form. I just know that you can do that. Then I need to know, what you want after that is to know how many hours someone did it, so that you need a system that kind of tracks that. And then you want people's reviews of you, and how you get those three items, and you'd be able to pretty quickly figure out who you should hire, for things. And so we're, that's the, those are the things that I'm thinking about a lot, but not immediately. But those are the things, those are the pieces. Go ahead, Roscoe, and then John.
I'm going to harken back to Final Cut Pro, which is close to your heart. So when Apple, which was a big, organization, tried to put in certification, it disrupted a lot of things. The people who were providing the training were like, oh, do I want to jump? It was expensive too, to be honest, a certification from Apple. And so the answer is wait, and let the organic trainers come up. You'll find out who they are. And if you put in certification too early, you'll have a lot of unqualified people that are certified, but really don't know what they're doing.
And to your point, that's exactly why I'm not doing it right now, is just letting it just kind of gel and figure stuff out and figure out how we're going to do it and figure out what we want to train and what we want to create. And it probably won't start as a certification. It'll start as like, hey, here are some tips and let's see who shows up and let's see who does it. But you always have to be careful about when you pour concrete, and I just don't think we're quite ready to pour the concrete. That's all. We're still figuring out what the foundation should look like. Go ahead, John, and then Jeff.
Well, at the university, when I was working with Apple Distinguished Educators, we needed to get a way to get continuing education units and university credit. So I've actually talked to our extended ed, and Roscoe's talked about that. So if there was a value of people getting CEUs or university credit for the courses that Andy's starting and doing, there's a method here for doing it. Mm-hmm. It sometimes helps people in the higher ed or K-12 because they get pay advances based on education. But there's also some scholarships and job training things that if you actually enroll in a university program, you get funding. So if there's an interest, I'll pursue that with the players.
I'm not a big paper person. I have to admit that I don't have any degrees from anything. I don't even have a high school degree. So I kind of just go, but I do recognize that CEUs is useful because it gives people an opportunity
we're not all things. Alex, and there's lots of people who come up the ranks and.
Yep. No, so I understand why it's useful, but it's hard. I'm just saying that it's hard for me to get my head around it. That's all. So
it's hard to take me serious in this coat. So what can I say?
I know you're
getting rave reviews in the chat for it, though. I'm telling you.
Yeah,
it's a good look.
It's like it does look like a kind of like a color. It's
test
like a color,
bars, chroma key shirt, and a super black T-shirt underneath it.
It really is. It's like a resolution chart.
Really should see that on the scopes. It's pretty epic.
Yeah,
it's the European test pattern.
Yep, that's great.
That was my first comment too, John. That was an amazing coat. Where did you get it? Where can we buy them?
First thing I thought when I saw it was band uniform.
I think the biggest thing with a lot of the education side of since we're somewhat in new ground here. That's one big thing that I'm finding too, is as we're walking across this wide open prairie, we're discovering new tools and trying to learn them. And it's been so beneficial to have, this kind of brain trust here to bounce things off of. As I have kind of been on my own tangent out into a certain amount of space in the clouds and stuff, I find it is very hard to find other like people. And I know this is kind of where we've kind of compared some ideas together and kind of build it up. Do you feel like that the class structure though is what we need? I find it very hard to focus the webinars or the things that are talking about it. I've been approached multiple times about when are you going to sell a class? When can I buy a class from you? And I just can't figure out a way. Is it really worth it? Would enough people pay for it to make it worth your time? That kind of thing too. I do consulting and stuff, but that's a little different because it's one-on-one. It's not one-to-many. And I just wonder if one-to-many in some of these higher level type of concepts, are they really learning at that point?
Yeah. Again, I think that what and we're not ready for this yet, but so I don't really believe in traditional classes. If people haven't guessed already, I don't believe in them. Like fundamentally, don't believe in them. And I think that they're painful to be in. I think I thought that they were painful when I was 6 years old. And so I don't have any interest in the traditional classroom structure. But what I do, the classes that we're experimenting with is, I'm going to give you video that you watch on your own time. I'm going to give you a nutrient-rich environment to learn from. So we've got Andy here a lot. We've got, in the post shows and the pre-shows, there's places to talk about OSC. Just to use OSC as the example, Zoom OSC as an example, you have places that you can ask questions, and then we're going to challenge you to do things. So challenge-based, and then discussion is something that I'm highly interested in the process of. I'm not interested in watching anybody go through something. Like when we do Resolve, you're going to get Ripple training videos, and then they're going to answer questions for an hour. They're not going to show you anything during that time. So when I think of those, like I think a single webinar, like I'm going to do some of those, but the idea is to get people to think about it, not necessarily to train them on everything that they need to do it. It's the idea is to inspire them in a direction. So the actual hands-on classes, I think, should be more of a Q&A system. Now, at some point, we need to get to a point where we can test people so that they can get onto the playing field. But I think that where this needs to go is far more, I think of sports as a better example of it. There's no real test, there's, I guess, some classes, you can go to some stuff, but there's this huge feeder system that is sports, let's say baseball or football, where kids start playing when they're kids, and then they start, they go into amateur sports, and then they go into professional sports. But there's not a lot of a degree. There's just there's output, and I think that in a lot of places, what we want to figure out is ways to first get people trained, and then follow that up with opportunities for them to both do it and to show that they're good at it in places that aren't too far off the ground. That can be volunteer work, that can be stuff internally. If we start doing more events, we might give people more of an opportunity, the way Mickey's doing cutting, and then sometimes Sky does it, and sometimes other people do it. And as we start to build up more of that production, people can jump in and become part of that, and they can learn it. And if it bumps off on one of our meetings, and then we go, don't do that again. It's not a client suing you, for screwing up their event. So, because the thing is that we can talk about degrees, but what people need are flight hours. You just need flight hours. When you fly a plane, you need flight hours. So we can have discussions about this, but the most important thing is flight hours. How many times do you do it, and are you learning from that? But that's how we find people. Is not through. And a lot of people start with me. They've started in some small amount, but the reason we built up Pixel Core teams was to give people flight hours. For a year, they're working on something and trading notes and working on those processes. And then they come out of it. I just hired a Pixel Core team, literally a former Pixel Core team, to do rotoscoping for me. They have a company called Boundary Effects. That was the Pixel Core compositing team. That was, they're still a company. And so the thing is it's just a matter of giving people reps is the thing that they have to do. Jason, and then Mickey.
Couldn't agree more that flight hours are what matters. It's that one metric that, actually determines what matters. I think both of my degrees fell off of the wall 6 months ago, and I'm thinking to myself, maybe I should get those. Maybe they should just collect dust, because a cert is only as good as your what you're doing with it.
Yeah. So anyway, go ahead, Mickey, and then John, and then we'll move on. We took this one for a while.
Definitely
questions.
Yeah, just on the point of flight hours, before office hours, I've been on less than probably at that time less than 10 meetings, my whole life before office hours. And it's not like I came into this knowing how to cut in Zoom. It was just one time. Previously, it was Grant that was doing the cutting, and one time he actually went to bed, and I asked hey, do you want someone to try to take over? So and since then I've been doing it.
Yeah.
And reps.
It's just so much of it is how do we give people, and I mean, I'm not ready to do this just yet, but one of the things I'll be focusing on as we go through the year is how do we give people the opportunity to do work where there is enough pressure that you get to do it, but not so much pressure that it breaks you. It's it's like working out. How do you give enough weight that makes you stronger without breaking bones and ripping things and so on and so forth. And so we need to give people more of those opportunities. And again, my opinion is that should eventually start when kids are 10, that they start learning how to do media production and learning how to do all the things that we're doing. By the time they're 18, they're pretty useful. And then they just, and then if they want to go to college, they can. If they want to go to work, they can, and that's where we should, in my opinion, that's where we need to get to. Next question.
Greg Yotes of Gridley, Kansas says, when trying to incorporate SolidWorks or Pro Engineer CAD animations into live streams, what should I watch out for with video stream problems from the CAD workstation? And he's doing HDMI into an ATEM Mini.
Your grids, if you have a world grid, it will break up because of the compression. It just doesn't handle those little lines moving. So if you have animations and you're doing a world grid, if you're doing the actual animation of the stuff, it should look pretty good. It just depends on the frame rate coming out. Otherwise, it should look fine. It's just a matter of fine detail, especially in a computer, because everything's clearly on and off. You'll tend to see more macro blocking as you output that than you would otherwise. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I would say in one sentence, just beware of very small vertical and horizontal lines.
Yeah, they tend to alias badly. Next question.
Henry Ramos of Yonkers, New York. Gimbal suggestions for a Sony A7. Currently has a G18-105 lens made for smaller sensors due to budget, but interested in upgrading that for live gimbal use as well.
What you got there, Jason?
This is the cheaper Ronin. This is the Ronin S. I want to say it's maybe $600-700. A little bit more work than the fiber one that I have with the 6K, but works pretty well.
The larger Ronins are stuff that we've used a lot of and we've been pretty happy with. I can't think of the Ronin. Is it the Ronin M? I believe is the larger.
Yeah, the Ronin M's the one that's that has all the way around.
So, and then I think it's is it Movi or Mova that has the kind of another version of that. But I would say that the DJI stuff is pretty nifty when it comes to gimbals. It's a pretty safe place to go when you're talking about the level of an A7. Below that you can get all kinds of little gimbals that do great. But even I was going to grab it, but the gimbal that I use for my phone is still a DJI. I am kind of insulted the fact that you have to log into DJI and sign up to get to use the new DJI gimbal with your phone. It's really like there's no reason for it other than they just
I have a specific phone exactly for that.
It's really annoying. So I would go back to the DJI 2 if you're going to do it for a phone. But if you're doing it for an A7, I still think that they probably make some of the best ones. And it's not just that they make a good one; it's just that it scales. There's lots of controllers. There's lots of things. There's lots of bits and pieces that they've added. The virtual gear head for the Ronin is amazing. Stuart, and then Sky, and then Mickey, real quick.
Yeah, Jason, will that one clear the back of a camcorder instead of a mirrorless?
Oh, see, I love this question. Okay, which camcorder, Stuart?
Oh, wouldn't be the VG900E at all, would it?
I don't think so. I mean, that's really the difference between a big gimbal with two motors and the smaller one, because you've got that centralized anchor point in the back.
Mickey, and then Sky.
Yeah, Henry specifically mentions for use as a live gimbal. I guess he means for broadcasting the feed live. So I would probably go with the Ronin M or the regular Ronin, the larger one, the Ronin 2, or the Movi, because it has flexibility in terms of powering your camera. You can power off its actual 14-volt battery pack, and also you have flexibility in terms of routing the signal to your, I assume, wireless transmitter.
Yeah, I agree. That's Sky.
I've purchased a smaller version, FEIYU G6, and it's been having a lot of issues with the stabilization. Yep. Even on the phone, and it just vibrates, but it does have the wire capability of going from the camera into the handle, so you could hardwire it for that live concept. But if you can help me get it to stabilize and not vibrate like crazy, I'd love to use it.
That's one of the reasons we recommend the DJI ones, because they have less trouble. Let's move on to the next question. We're running out of time now.
Okay, Johnny Estias of Manila says, the registration for the Saturday classes link in Alex's email just opens my Zoom client but doesn't take me to the registration form. Am I doing something wrong?
It was a typo on my end. I was typing fast this morning. It's just a direct link. That is the link to the meeting. There's no registration, and that has to do with, again, I have to talk to Andy about what the permissions are that are required for that, and we'll figure it out. But I just made it a direct link into that with a password. The password, by the way, is not random. You can try to figure it out. Anyway, next question.
Sky is back in actually with a report. Just found that Filmic Pro has an export multi-clips function from inside it. 2K 21 clips took 5 minutes. Transfer to the Apple laptop over AirDrop. So it'll be even faster with a hardwire. So there you go.
Yep,
Guy Cochran of Seattle is in with, can we see how John's code appears on the vector scope? That's an important question.
Okay, there we go. It's all over the place. Oh, there's like some pure colors in there.
There's some
You got
definite
there.
pure
Stand
Look
up,
at that.
son.
Oh wow! It almost does what it's supposed to do in the vector scope. Look at that. It's so close. It's so
Yeah.
close to pure colors. Like that's hilarious.
Red's a hair off, but man, that's great.
Just so you know, they cost
printed
less
well.
on Amazon than they do from the factory.
Oh, that is.
I already looked at it. $99, right? And I'm thinking,
is
man, the remotes
60
as a band
69.
uniform. That's
The
it.
remotes. No, don't do it. To
The
him.
band
Don't-
uniform.
It's good as an example, but that's gone too far. You've gone too far. All right. Next question. Next question.
69 on
Green
Amazon.
screen works on my shirt.
Moving on, Ernest Floyd of Bastrop, Louisiana says, can Guy show us how his DVE store feed is set up?
Sure. It is basically a PC. I don't know if you guys can see. Let me cut to that. So it's just a PC that's running the Zoom room. That's all you guys. And then next to it is an old Mac, and it has the output of that going into there. So you can see the HDMI capture card, and this is running Scopebox, and then it's just feeding it back out. So HDMI out from there into there, HDMI out from there into there, and that's how it works.
That HDMI capture card looks like it's flexing that input pretty hard.
Yeah, that's the ATEM Connect.
Ouch.
Yeah, I should get. Yeah, it's
Strain
integrated.
relief.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
it.
go ahead, Roscoe.
Amazon had a $18 or $19 HDMI to USB with a flexible cord on it, and I'm going to try it out soon.
Good. Yeah, one of the things I want to do is actually run those through scopes. I want to get a whole bunch of capture devices and then run them through the same signal through scopes to compare it, because I'm very curious about what we've seen in ones that are below $50 is that they're really punchy. So they're doing something to the signal that's pretty unfortunate. But it'll be interesting to see, to be able to measure that. But I haven't seen that one. Next question.
Mark Harder is in with our last question of the day. At the point, is the Saturday office hours going to be the largest potential use of Zoom OSC? Is everyone going to sign up with their Zoom OSC client?
I think that largest potential use of Zoom OSC, I think it's still pretty, that'd be pretty calm. Like our little Saturday thing. I think that, yeah. Andy, like straight to the heart there. Andy's like, this is gonna be it. This is gonna be as good as it gets. I think that the Saturday sessions are a tiny scratch on the surface of what can be done. So we'll see some stuff. I think we're in kind of a very, very small compared to what's possible. That's if Saturday was going to be the biggest use of Zoom OSC, then we wouldn't be doing the Saturday on Zoom OSC. Go ahead, Roscoe, and then Andy.
Andy, is there a reason we shouldn't sign in with the client? Is there any reason we shouldn't?
I actually would do a double join. So I would join from a vanilla client and from the Zoom OSC client, so that if you want to show what your Zoom OSC is doing, you can screen share your Zoom OSC client. We can see it. If you join from the client, we can't see any of the windows that it generates. So that would be unfortunate. And I think my read of the question was that, will it be a meeting with the most number of the highest density of Zoom OSCs in there at once? And I think that potentially, yeah. And that's one of the intentions of the way that we distributed the keys, is that when we get to remote control, you're going to have to buddy up over the course of the week. You're going to have to find somebody else with a Zoom OSC, and you get on the call and try to remote control them and play around and do that kind of stuff. So that's the intention of having the meetings with all the bots there. We can do a lot of fun stuff.
That's great.
Wait, are you saying you're going to double the instances of logons?
Yeah, we're going to pump those numbers up, Alex.
Yeah, I know. It'll
Wait a second.
It'll screw up my average view time, or increase the average. I don't know how that's going to work. Anyway, go ahead. We got one more question that
came in late. Greg Yotes of Gridley, Kansas says, what's the preferred way to get audio from an audio rack used in a church into an iPhone for YouTube streaming masses?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Preferred way? Yeah, something like a mixed pre will work as an interface for phones.
Yeah, so you can definitely use it's the Lightning to USB on an iPhone anyway. Lightning to USB with power,
A.
and then
Yeah.
yeah, A, and then connected to many different USB interfaces will work inside of that. Now go ahead, Jason, and then Bill.
Yeah, anything that works, with a pure input, in theory, should work. But I'd say an iRig is the fastest, easiest way between A and Z. They're cheap. You get what you pay for, though.
Yep. All right. I think Bill, did you have a last one?
No, I was just going to say I showed that little Saramonic. There are a couple of places that have XLR to Lightning adapters with phantom power if you're using condenser microphones and stuff like that will take the signal through. But
go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, just one thing to add though is make sure whatever device you use, make sure it's capable of taking in line level, not only mic level, because if it's coming from a mixer or a rack, it will 90% of the time be sending line level.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Thanks everybody. Thank you to the attendees for pulling us through with great questions and moving things forward. And thanks to the panel for the great answers as always. It's fun. We're gonna have a good. It's gonna be a good week. We've got a lot of good stuff to talk about here. So I'm excited about that. I'm gonna go ahead and start a reminder that I don't know how many of these Andy will be able to be available for the post ones, but we will open a room that's just Zoom OSC for for the next month. There'll be a room breakout room inside of all the post shows that are for anybody who wants to just talk about that. So anyway, we'll see all of you tonight. Remember, doing this again, 6 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. We'll see how many people show up and if we can think of new questions. So we always seem to be able to figure it out, but we're pushing the outer edge here. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about that. Do we need meters and Mukana stream for that? If not, if we do, I'm not sure if I could make it. I'll shoot TJ a message.
Let's see if TJ's coming, and we would like to do that, but it doesn't have to be there for the first one. This will be just us. This is kind of a hello world, kind of turning on and seeing who shows up and how it goes. So our first Monday night one will be tonight at 6 o'clock Pacific Standard. We probably won't get into the meat of talking until 6:30. We'll still do mic checks and give everybody a little time to get in and everything else. And so I don't want to go earlier than that, mostly because there's another show. Ed Willick has another show, the Tech Talks, the AV Tech Talks, and I don't want to step on his show. So we're going to start at 6 right after his show, and then go into that. Anyway, so we'll go ahead and jump off to the post show. So stand by.
Goodbye, cruel world. Quick, the second graders have the con.
Is this the rapture and we were left behind? Like